This is Football at 4.
Yes, indeed. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, drops tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., and brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. Geoff Mosher's here from the Inside the Birds podcast. Tomorrow morning, I would imagine at 6 o'clock, a lot of Eagles conversation getting you. You're only 34 days away from the start of Eagles training camp. Moshe, how about that?
I know. It's around the corner, but I want it to feel like an eternity, just personally. Could use a nice summer break.
You could use some more time away from what's going to be a highly anticipated season.
That's right. I need to mentally prepare for it all.
Watching this Phillies game right now, coupled with the way the Sixers season ended, don't you just want something else?
Yeah, but every time you yearn for – we were yearning for the Philly season. We were yearning for the Sixers playoffs, weren't we? And then we were left disappointed. So it's not like the Eagles are coming off such a great season that you're thinking Super Bowl, although you never know. But, it's kind of tough right now.
No, you're not you're definitely not thinking Super Bowl, but I think one thing, we talked about the Eagles 53. We'll kind of look at the defensive side of the ball a little bit more today, but I almost want to kind of dive in a little deeper too on Nick Sirianni himself and the expectations, how you're just ready to see how this team is going to be presented and what they might look like and how different they might really be, just based on the coaching change.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it's hard to – one thing that you really want to see from Nick Sirianni and his staff that I think is hard to measure just by watching, but almost by waiting and seeing, is talent development. Because we constantly talk on Inside the Birds about this coaching staff, this head coach, Nick Sirianni, his emphasis on talent development and competition, developing talent through competition. We know that wasn't the strongest asset of the prior coaching staff, and that there were several positions that no matter what just either had constant rotation of coaches, whether it was wide receiver or D-line, even though the D-line was good, there were always D-line coaches, or just in general wide receiver talent, where it was like you're just waiting for guys to develop and it wouldn't happen, or it would be inconsistent, like with Nelson Aguilar. So I really look forward to seeing how Nick Sirianni, the tone that he sets to his coaches and how his coaches then set the tone for the entire team, how that's manifested as far as talent development. And that's not going to be found out in training camp or even maybe in the first few months of the season. It's going to be a long-term thing.
Right. That's the part of it that is I want to see, not get to training camp, but get there to kind of see how they start implementing because we chronicled on Monday, wide receiver, who's going to be where, who's in the battle, who's this. Running back, same thing. There's a lot of battles just to get those battles off the ground and see how this new coaching staff kind of sees what has been perceived as a lot of misses by Howie Roseman, right? That's where I'm kind of interested to see if they're seeing the same thing that Peterson and his staff saw. Hey, is J.J. Arcega-Whiteside as crappy as Peterson said? Yep, yes he is. We're not going to play. You know what I mean? Those kind of things I think are going to be very interesting to see, and you might be able to find them out in August.
Yeah, some careers might get rescued. Some other ones may go in the tank. You never know. It just depends. That's the fascinating part of a new coaching staff is you get to know what they prioritize, what they look for, what they value, and then you get to see kind of the front office then adjust to that, like a good front office should do, as far as getting the right type of players in and the wrong players out.
Yeah, and I know I wanted to ask you, too, because we're talking a little bit about coaches before we get to some defensive stuff here. People talk about the importance of coaching and developing a guy like Stoutland, and there was some talk about him leaving, right? They almost left, and they got him to stay. And you wonder, how important he is to the offensive line.
Well, all you had to do is hear Jordan Mailata say that he almost had a heart attack when he read the reports that Jeff Stoutland was leaving. You look at a guy like Mailata who'd never even played any form of American football, nothing other than the rugby that he was playing in Australia, and is sitting here today, just 3 years later, with an opportunity to become the left tackle for 3.5 for the starting left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. And you can only imagine that he knows that he didn't just do this on his own without some really solid coaching and some really, really hard coaching, to be honest with you, drilling. And Geoff may have been, one of the guys from the last staff that gets to keep his job because of that reputation and because he actually did hold players accountable to the point where they realized that if they didn't do what he said, they weren't going to play and they weren't going to get better.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. I would imagine you guys did the 53 on Monday for the offensive side of the ball. You're probably working on looking at the defense, so we'll do a little preview of that since you are not back on the rest of the week here. And one area I'd like to get your really, looking at these defensive end spot, when they get to camp in 35 days, I feel like, we talk about how wide open things. You got Brandon Graham, you've got Derek Barnett, you've got Kerrigan and Josh Sweat. Who else is around that is interesting here?
Well, I think you named it there. I think the scheme is more interesting right now than the player, to be honest with you, because you look at guys like Jannard Avery and Kerrigan, and they're going to play some linebacker, but they're also going to rush the passer if they're on the team from that regard. So do we focus? We've always focused on DN because we know Jim Schwartz is a four-man rush kind of guy. Only occasionally is going to blitz. When he does blitz, it's going to be a corner or a linebacker, something that you'll see. But when you bring in a guy who, like Jonathan Gannon, has a Mike Zimmer-esque way of looking at things and wanting to do things, you can talk about linebackers as DNs. They walk up to the line, they rush the passer. You could have a five-man rush with three defensive ends and two tackles on the field, with one of those defensive ends really masquerading at first as a linebacker. So, but the bottom line is Brandon Graham's going to be on the field. Fletcher Cox is going to be on the field. Javon Hargrave is probably going to be on the field a lot in pass rushing downs. And then you got to figure out some other guys. Ryan Kerrigan will be one. Josh Sweat will be one. Derek Barnett, I think, has to play a lot early for them to understand if this guy can A, hold up, and B, be continuously and repetitively successful. He has shown a lot of flashes at times when healthy in his career, but he has not had, I would say, 5 or 6 games where he's been that kind of first round pick that you're looking for. You want to see that consistency week in and week out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is what he was 2016 or 2017 that he was drafted, and he really
17,
he really hasn't made his mark yet. Like, I don't know what he is. I don't know that he's a bust. I don't know that he's great. I don't know that he's scratching the surface as a Pro Bowler. Is he just a guy? I don't really – I can't give you a fair opinion, I feel like, about him. If you were to ask me, hey, do you want him here, I would say it doesn't matter. I don't really care one way or the other. He doesn't do it for me.
Take it or leave it. Yeah, and that's kind of been his career, as you're saying. He's had some – 2 years ago he had 6.5 sacks in 14 games, and he had 22 quarterback hits. And it's not a bad season. It's a good to decent season. It's really not bad. But if you want to put the context, well, he was the 14th overall pick, he should be getting 10 to 12 sacks. Well, then you're disappointed. When he was a rookie, he didn't start, but he played every game and he had 5 sacks and 16 hits and 2 fumble recoveries. Like, you saw as a rookie an impact that he would make as a situational pass rusher. But then he only played 6 games. Maybe that's what he is. And right, that's exactly what he might end up just being best at, which isn't a bad thing, by the way. It's bad because you were the 14th overall pick, but I'm saying that there's a role in this league for situational pass rushers.
But the problem is, on this team, they need more from him than a situational pass rusher, because the guys they have behind him are situational pass rushers.
Exactly.
Know what I mean?
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it's like he had the game against, I think it was San Francisco, last year, where he dominated the game. It was one of the better games that he's played. It was either San Francisco. It was early in the year. He had a big game, and you were like, okay, there you go. And, you don't get that. And he's been hurt a lot. But that's part of why you are who you are, right?
Yeah, that is exactly it. The best ability is durability, or availability, as Bill Parcells used to say. He had, again, that San Francisco game you were alluding to, where he had 2 hits, had a couple of tackles behind the line of scrimmage. I think he edged out Trent Williams, one of the best left tackles in the league, to make a stop behind the line of scrimmage. He had a half a sack in that game. That was a good game. And he had 2 sacks the week before against the Bengals. So you're looking at that Cincinnati game and San Francisco game and saying, all right, now I'm starting to see it. But then Pittsburgh came. No sacks, no tackles for a loss. Then Baltimore, no sacks, no tackles for a loss, no quarterback hits. So then you go back-to-back games against 2 really good teams and good quarterbacks, and you did not produce. And that's kind of the story of this guy's career.
The defensive tackle spot should be deep. I mean, not deep. Should be – well, maybe it is deep. I think got some rookies, so we don't know. But Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, you're not going to – it's going to be hard-pressed to find a better tandem in the league than those 2.
Yeah, very top-heavy. I wouldn't quite call it deep. Right. I would say very talented at the top with the 2 starters there. But who's your number 3 defensive tackle right now? Is it Milton Williams because he's a rookie and there's some buzz around him? Well, he's got a lot to prove. Plus, he's kind of smaller. He's going to be a guy who plays D-tackle and defensive end. Is it going to be Hassan Ridgeway, who has shown, not like Derek Barnett because he's not as explosive, but a decent enough player when he's out there, but has also had some injury issues. So you've got Ridgeway, you've got T.Y. McGill. I mean, you don't really Raekwon Williams is an undrafted free agent from Michigan State 2 years ago who got in a little bit last year. But none of, when you're talking about Raekwon Williams, T.Y. McGill, Hassan Ridgeway, and rookie Milton Williams, you really just don't know. I mean, that's not a solid number 3 yet because no one's proven it.
You're right. Yep, absolutely. The Williams thing will be interesting. Like, you drafted him in the 3rd round. Well, last year your 3rd round pick, Davion Taylor, you got skedaddle out of, right? So Are you going to go for a second straight year with a project guy who you don't get a whole heck of a lot of rookie season worth from?
Yeah, I mean, not exactly apples to apples in that at least Milton Williams has played this position for a long time, has dominated the position at the college level, even if he did play at Louisiana Tech. Whereas I get what you're saying by project because you still want him to get the strength and the motor to be a defensive tackle.
And he was a small college guy who was a kind of a tweener.
Yeah. Davion, I mean, man. Listen, people are going to start to think that I dislike this guy, and that's not the case at all. I've never met him, and all indications are that he's a really good human being, a great guy, and you root for him to kind of overcome the tremendous odds against him. But as I've told you many times, and we've said on Inside the Birds many times, Adam and I are hard-pressed to find any other team that had this guy ranked higher than the 5th round.
Wow.
And some had him way lower than that, and it's not like it's perfectly understandable why. Is because he did not play a whole lot of football until he got to Colorado for, I think it was a year or 2, or I think it was just 1 year starting and did not play a traditional linebacker role even at Colorado that translates well to the NFL. So there's just a whole lot of football learning that he's got to do. I mean, it's great that he can run and chase down Lamar Jackson. That's a wonderful thing, but that's still a 20-yard gain that Lamar Jackson had, or whatever it was. So they got to figure it out with him.
Well, and I guess the comparison comes in that you can't go 2 years in a row, hopefully, without getting anything from a 3rd-round pick. You're hoping the 3rd-round pick comes in and can give you at least rotational snaps.
Yeah, I say this quite often, and I hope people understand. I understand that the draft is about your future and that you don't discard somebody after a year and you want them to really become the player that they should be by year 2 or 3, right? I totally get that. But it does not mean that year 1 is a freebie, that you should expect nothing, that it's acceptable to take a guy that you expect is going to be good in 3 years, but have given you nothing in year 1 and year 2 until you got there. Because you know what? Every game matters. Every year counts. Coaches get hired. Coaches get fired. Super Bowl dreams crash like they did last year for the Eagles. And if Davion Taylor's a really good player in 2 years from now, Mike, that's good. You could say, well, that worked. But what about all the damage that was done in year 1 and year 2 when you were expecting some kind of contribution?
That's 100% right. And that's why, and I know, Vinny Curry, you certainly have covered him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Can Williams be that type of player where he plays outside, they move him into the inside? Like, I feel like maybe he was a 2nd-round pick, Vinny.
Yeah, I think a little bit different kind of player. Whereas Vinny was sort of an inside player under Chip Kelly because a linebacker would kind of come down as a pass rusher. and maybe create like a 4 or 5-man front, and Vinny would maybe have to beat a tackle or a guard in the gap between a guard and a tackle. Whereas I still see Milton Williams is more of like a 3 technique, natural 3 technique, Fletcher, which is what a Fletcher Cox would play, and burst up the middle. Similarities in maybe athleticism and burst, but different in body build and natural position.
Gotcha. All right, let me go to linebacker here, where this is interesting. Eric Wilson, they brought in. They have T.J. Edwards. He got a lot of snaps. Alex Singleton got a lot of snaps. Sean Bradley, a draft pick from last year. You mentioned Taylor. Jannard Avery is in the linebacker group now. So it seems that this is like a lot like the wide receiver core without the top-end guys, but a lot of guys who are all different battling for really 2 spots.
Yeah, and actually, no, probably even battling for more. I mean, Eric Wilson,
2 spots on the field, they'll have more on the roster.
Okay, right, because they're going to be in nickel mostly, so they'll have 2 linebacker formations. Eric Wilson is a starting linebacker. The conversation ends there. Eric Wilson is a starting linebacker. Who's the other starting linebacker? Don't know. Is it Alex Singleton? We'll see. Is he probably the lead horse? Perhaps, because he played well last year, but he still has to be that guy in this defense. Could it be anybody else? I don't know. Could it be Jannard Avery? Maybe if they're in a certain formation where that strong side linebacker is going to come down on the line and rush the passer. If they're 3rd and 2 and they want to stop the run, but still be in nickel in case the team passes, then maybe you've got Alex Singleton or Sean Bradley or Davion Taylor. There's a whole lot of competition there to whittle itself out. But all you can say right now is Eric Wilson's going to be on the field probably nickel and dime and in base. He's your starting linebacker. After that, it's just put him all in the blender, put them all in competition and see who comes out of there.
That's it's one of those things like Edwards is good against the run.
I forgot about Edwards. Yeah, he's in the mix too.
But how many times is in a nickel defense you're going to put the guy who's the run stuffer out there?
Right. I almost think that whereas in the past under Jim, Mike, we've seen you have your nickel defense, your dime defense, right? And you have your nickel linebackers, your dime linebacker. I would, under Jonathan Gannon, that you might have different variations of your nickel defense, which means you may have, again, if you want to stop the run, if it's 3rd and 3, but you want to be in nickel because the other team comes out 3 wide, but you still think they might run, you might have T.J. Edwards or Alex Singleton out there with Eric Wilson. But if it's 3rd and 7, and you want to hit the quarterback a little bit, well, you're going to have Eric Wilson out there for coverage, and you're going to have probably maybe like a Jannard Avery or somebody else, Davion Taylor, whoever, who you think can rush the pass. Ryan Kerrigan, who can rush the passer a little bit. If it's you don't want to hit the quarterback, but you don't want to stop the run, you just want 2 really good cover guys because it's 3rd and 6, and they got a good tight end and a good slot receiver. Then it's Eric Wilson, and I don't know. That's what's left to be figured out. Does Davion Taylor make that huge step because they want him to be a cover guy? Or is it going to be Sean Bradley, who's not really a good cover guy, but he may be the last man standing at that point? Injuries are going to also help decide some of these competitions too.
Yep, we know corner's a mess, right? That we really know. That's almost like not even worth going over just because you could pick him out of a hat and probably figure out who has a better shot of being on that depth chart right now. Accurate?
Yes, very, very accurate. They got a number 1 and a lot of number 5s.
There you go. And then the safety spot, you've got Anthony Harris and McLeod, and I think those 2 are solid, depending on McLeod, if he'll be ready to go. And then after that, you got the Andrew Adams, who they signed, Jacoby Stevens, I guess, if they're going to play him at safety or linebacker, we don't know. Marcus Epps, who they seem to like. Elijah Riley's out there. So, you've got a pretty – and who was the kid they drafted last year from Kayvon Wallace? So you've got the safety spot's another one much like the receivers where you have your 2 guys and then everybody else.
Yeah, and one thing I'm curious about, I'm glad you brought up Jacoby Stevens, who's going to play linebacker but has a safety background. I'm sure they will figure out certain ways to use him advantageously, and I think they drafted the kid – Patrick Johnson from Tulane, right, who was a pass rusher, but they're going to turn into a linebacker, if I'm not mistaken. So the one thing we don't know is, and that I look forward to finding out, is how they kind of count these tweener players, what value they see, what skill set they can bring, and if they truly can be tweeners, how does that impact their numbers at certain positions? think about last year. I think they went a little light on corner coming out of training camp because they knew that Jalen Mills, who was a safety, could move back to corner, which he wound up doing when there were injuries if needed. So if you have 3 or 4 players who you think can occupy multiple positions, if you have a guy like Jacoby Stevens who really impresses, even though he's a late round pick, and you want him on your 53, do you go lighter at linebacker because he's made your team as a safety, for example, or do you not even count them positionally? You're just taking the best, 20 some odd, like don't count the defensive linemen, the best 20, or 20 back end type of players, and you'll figure out where they go instead of, we need 6 safeties and 4 corner. You know what I'm saying? Like that opens up the door to more versatility and less structure as far as numbers at each position.
Should be interesting. I know the guys on the Inside the Birds podcast will go deeper into this. Tomorrow morning it drops at 6 a.m. Now I'm just anticipating that. Am I accurate on that?
It does drop at 6 a.m.
No, that you're talking about the defense.
Oh. Yes, we'll be doing the 53-man roster projection defense edition. That's correct.
So they'll go a lot deeper into what we just did here on Football at 4. Geoff Mosher. All right, man. Take care.
Have a great one.